So today we are going to be revisiting the book Essentialism by Greg McKeown. Just on a personal note, I admire Greg McKeown deeply as a person, as an individual. From time to time, he will text me, reach out to me, ask how things are going. For someone who's kind of famous and involved in really high-level stuff, I always appreciate that. And years ago, Greg was the one who actually inspired me and kind of motivated me and gave me confidence to actually launch this podcast in the first place. So shout out to Greg for that. So we're excited to talk about it. Again, what we're doing is we are revisiting some of the initial books when I first launched this podcast by myself. We're revisiting the initial books where I did an interview solo without Britain. And the ones that we did solo, we're kind of going back, revisiting. And what we're doing is we're basically picking out what we say are the top 5 clips from that episode. So what we're going to kind of do today is share a few clips of Greg McKeown of what Britain and I went through the episode and said, hey, these are the key paradigms, the key clips that someone would need to listen to understand the book really quick. And that's kind of what we're doing. So with that,
we're taking out all the fluff for you guys. So you guys are getting the Spark Notes version, the Cliff Notes. Yeah. We're gonna make it worth your time.
I haven't heard Spark Notes for a long time.
Yeah, I use those too much. I would have read a paradigm shifting book, Spark Notes.
Yeah, that's funny. So with that, let's play this first clip where Greg shares kind of the story in his own life on a personal level that kind of sparked it all on his journey of essentialism. So I'll play that now.
In some ways, grew out of an experience I had when I had a manager at the time email me and say that Friday between 1 and 2 would be a bad time for my wife to have a baby because I was needed at this client meeting. And I'm sure that they were joking, but as it turns out, we did go to the hospital Thursday night. We're there Friday morning. Our daughter's been born. She's well. My wife is well. Well, as well as we are after having gone through the valley of the shadow of death the night before. And I, instead of being focused on that clearly essential moment and experience, and being singular about that, I'm feeling torn. I've got my laptop open. I've got my phone. I'm just trying to balance everything. I'm trying to keep everybody happy. And then to my shame, I go to the client meeting. And even afterwards, I remember my manager saying, well, look, the client will respect you for the choice you just made for this trade-off. And to be honest, the look on their faces didn't evince that sort of respect and confidence. And even if they had, it was clear to me in hindsight that I had just made a fool's bargain, that I'd violated something far more important for something relatively trivial. And what I learned was an important lesson, which was this: if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. And that really began a journey of first self-discovery, but then research and writing that gave birth to essentialism. Because I found that while maybe not many people have pulled a McKeown, many people have made decisions in such a way that they find themselves busy but not necessarily productive, stretched too thin at work or at home, and an experience that their day is often hijacked by other people's agenda for them.
So that story that Greg shared, it's such a just crazy story when you think about it, that he would leave the birth of a child to attend a client meeting. But it highlights the principle of if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will, which I think is such a powerful thing. It reminded me, as we kind of reviewed this, of something our grandfather, Stephen R. Covey, said, quote what he said. He said, you have to decide what your highest priorities are and have the courage pleasantly, smilingly, non-apologetically to say no to other things. And the way to do that is by having a bigger yes burning inside.
Funny, this story hits a little too close to home with me at the current moment. A few months ago, my daughter Rhoda was born. And at the time, it was the week leading up to the Super Bowl. And I still was injured, but I was still practicing and helping the team out there. And the coaches made it very clear that I had to kind of make a choice. And there was a lot of stress and pressure put on there. And especially when you feel like they hold all the cards and you have no choice. But I think a lot of times with scenarios like this, you have more choice than you think. But anyways, this story hit really close to home. Luckily, she held on and she was born after the Super Bowl. But yeah, I even felt that I had to fly out to New Orleans thinking that my wife might go into labor. And I was stressed out of my mind and thinking that I wasn't prioritizing the right things, but I was scared of being fired, things like that. So I get that. And I think everyone listening probably has had an experience where a superior has made them feel almost indispensable or irreplaceable. But you get the feeling that it's more used as a tactic to get you to do something or attend something than it is genuine, if that makes sense. They're using it more as a tactic to kind of string you along and tell you how great you are and how you never miss anything than you feel like it is genuine.
Totally. It reminds me, this kind of talking around this about prioritizing your life or else someone else will, is just how so much in our modern world and today's work environment, modern life celebrates busyness and yes man behavior, so much so. So again, that clip just, it sounds obvious, as in Britt and I, before we started recording, we talked about this, like a lot of these things you talk about, and we read these books and go through these paradigm shifts, like they sound so obvious when you listen to and read them, but what is common sense is not always common practice. And that is exactly what something like this is. But just that simple principle, if you don't prioritize your lives, someone else will.
Yeah. And I like what you said about how kind of modern life celebrates busy behavior, and how hard you work is equivalent to how much you work at times. And I think this next clip where Greg explains how there's a misconception of that. And he uses an analogy of how people view life as a coal mine, and you're going in to try and get as much coal out as you can. But he sees life more like a diamond mine. And so let's go to that clip, and he explains it really well.
The life is much more akin to a diamond mine, where it's not about how much stuff you get out. It's whether you can identify those few things that are exceptionally valuable, disproportionately important. And so your ability to discern those things in the first place, then to not be distracted by all the other stuff, because it's such a bad trade-off to get anything else out but the diamonds, and then to build a system to make it as easy as possible to continue going after the things that matter most. I mean, that's essentialism in a nutshell. And where, if you think about it in terms of a paradigm, the non-essentialist basically thinks everything is essential, whereas the essentialist thinks almost nothing is essential. But the few things that are just incredibly important and therefore worth the effort to be able to discover them in the first place.
So this clip for me reminded me of, again, for my career, I've mainly been in sales and sales leadership most of my career. And this clip reminded me the kind of this whole idea of less but better, and what are the activities that actually drive results. So just a very quick story is years ago, I was with a company and we would sell a lot of product into cities and municipalities. And there was a big city in the southeast part of the country where I wanted to sell into. And so I put this whole game plan together about how I was going to sell into the city and talk to all these different firms and companies that work with the city. And it was like a 3 or 4 month plan of meetings and emails and this great strategy that I was super proud of it. Like, this is going to be awesome. And then what ended up happening is just kind of by chance, I was able to have it was literally about a 15-minute meeting, maybe 20-minute meeting with 2 people at this city that basically were decision makers and were the ones that could pull strings. And in 15 minutes, I made as much progress as I would have made in about a year with my other strategy. And that whole experience just kind of blew my mind. Again, this is relating to like a sales job, but I think you can relate when you think about it in your own life of like, what are the essential activities that actually move the needle, that actually make things happen? And are you spending time on things that don't really matter? So for me in my personal career, in sales, that was a great learning for me. It's like, okay, this activity, I'm going to spend less time focused on the things that don't move the needle and try and be an essentialist and say, look, in the essential core of this sales role, what is going to move the needle? Those are the activities I'm going to focus on.
I love that story, and I see it too in sports. It's pretty obvious. I think once you get to the NFL, you look around and you realize that pretty much everyone has gotten there because they work on the essentials. But in college, I saw a lot of guys who had great potential, but would waste time, working on things that really didn't translate to the actual playing field. And someone I think about that's a great example of this is Devontae Smith. He is one of a handful of players in history to win a Heisman Trophy, a national championship, and a Super Bowl. And I've had the privilege of being his teammate for the past 3 years, and he's one of my best friends, and I just think the world of him. He's been a great mentor to me, and he's one of the only people that I weigh more than on the team. So, yep, you heard it here first. I have him by about 4 pounds, and I'm very proud of that. But for someone who is very skinny and, not the prototypical body type, he has a lot of people and has had a lot of people try to make him something that he's not. And he just does not give them the time of day. And he works so hard, but he works so smart. And seriously, he works harder than anyone, but he's always doing things that actually matter. And these drills that actually matter. And I've even seen him and heard him say point blank that certain things are just dumb. He's like, I'm not doing that. That's stupid. You know what I mean? Or that's not worth it. So you see these guys that are gym rats and film rats, but it doesn't really move the needle. But everything he does, so it doesn't matter that he's not the prototypical. He's one of the best to ever do it.
Yeah, that's great. I really think that this concept, the principle of less but better, is also like, it's almost like a countercultural move in a way, right? Because again, going back to the busyness and all that. So let's go to the next clip of Greg, where Greg talks about essentialism as being a paradigm and not a hack.
If you try to do it all the time for everyone, you don't get it all. You get exhausted. You get burned out. You make 1 millimeter progress in 1 million directions. You have motion sickness instead of momentum. I mean, you don't get any of the things it says on the packaging. Instead, the essentialist is waking up in a way, a little bit like a Matrix moment, but you wake up and you go, what? This isn't how it works at all. If I want to make a distinctive breakthrough contribution, I have to make trade-offs other people aren't making. If I want to have a strategy that helps, strategy is what you say no to. It's not how can I do both. It's how can I make trade-offs in a way that are deliberate and thoughtful so I can get distinctive outcomes. It's not productivity. It gets put under productivity, fine. I've got no axe to grind about that. But really, it's not. It isn't about how to get more stuff done. It's about getting the right things done. And that is those are to me completely different processes. In the final analysis, essentialism is a way of thinking. And that's the ism. It's that you start to see life through that lens.
So I've got kind of a funny story with this where, again, Greg's talking about this idea that it's not the concept of essentialism sometimes gets put under the bucket of productivity. And he's saying it's not about productivity. It's not about getting more things done, but about getting the right things done. So I have a weird example. I don't know if this will work, but years ago, I'm talking like my high school days, some college days, back when we had CDs, I spent a crazy amount of time trying to organize and burn these CDs into iTunes. This was, again, back in the day. And I remember being so organized and so efficient and so productive about like, man, I'm always going to have all my songs digitized now, the ones that I love. I'm going to create these playlists. Like, I spent probably like 100 hours on this project. I spent so much time. I look back on that now. And again, I got to give myself grace, my past self grace here, because I couldn't have anticipated the world we're living in now where, music is streaming on your phone. You can pull up any song, playlist, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, all the things. But I look back at that and basically say, was all that time being efficient and productive of burning CDs, could I have spent that time in a different way? Now, I know it's kind of a funny example, but what it does for me in reflecting on it now is I say, okay, evaluating my life today, are there things that I am spending my time on right now that I will look back 10 years from now, 15 years from now, in a similar way to the CD burning incident, where I say, why did I focus on that? Why that was not an essential thing. Again, looking back, and again, I'm got to give myself grace in the past. But that story, I just think it's a good thing to like reflect on. Is essentialism. It's not about productivity. It's not about efficiency. It's all about getting the right things done. So when I originally read Essentialism and interviewed Greg, one of the first questions I had was, okay, this sounds really good for like a senior executive or someone that's later on in their career and has more flexibility. But is this really practical for someone that's like out of college, brand new to the workforce? This idea of being an essentialist and like saying no, like, can you say no to your boss and say, I don't do that because I'm an essentialist? That was a question that I posed to Greg, and this is how he answered. Play it here.
The question is someone new in their career able to apply essentialism in a organizationally savvy way, in a career accelerating way? And I think the answer is really clearly yes. You've got to apply it in a smart way. So you say, at first, you basically, at the beginning of your career, you're basically an order taker. Somebody says, you exist to make my life easier. So when I ask you to do this, the faster you can get it done, the better. Now, someone who is average, perhaps, in their way of approaching that kind of assignment will just do what's been said and maybe even the minimum they can do. And okay, I've done it. What's next? But I think an essentialist in that situation will say, well, what are they really trying to accomplish? I will do what they're asking to do, but I'm going to try and understand what their real intent is, so that over time, not at first, but over time, I can move up the ladder of influence so that eventually I'm not an order taker, I'm a trusted advisor.
I really like this. It reminds me of, obviously for those listening to this podcast, we refer to our grandfather a lot because he shaped everything that we think. But it reminds me a lot about habit 1 from his book, 7 Habits of Being Proactive. He used to tell stories, real life examples too, of employees, lower level, quote, employees who would be given tasks, but go above and beyond, and explain how that didn't necessarily mean doing more work, but anticipating future needs of who was giving those orders and tasks, or understanding the true intent and broader picture of those tasks and why they were being given, and just, running with the role that you were given in a different way than just completing the tasks, and how that helped them climb the ladder while also making them not feel too much like just completely up to the mercy of whatever task they were given, if that makes sense.
Yeah, one time our grandfather was an advisor to a university president, and there were quite a few of the executives that didn't love the university president and kind of were talking behind his back. But one of the executives, and you can read about this in the 7 Habits, but one of the executives basically chose to be proactive and not just completed the tasks that the president of the university asked to be done, but again, anticipated. And so as my grandpa in this advisory capacity to the president, the president told my grandpa one time, you just can't believe what this executive is doing. He not only completed the tasks, but he anticipated my needs and where I'm going and what I'm thinking. And so that was an example of, maybe someone that's like, hey, you got to do this, 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 this. But that ultimately that person, yes, he did the tasks, but from a bigger picture perspective, he says, okay, I want to understand what is the real intent? Why am I being asked to do this? What's the bigger picture here? And then he was proactive about it. And it just goes back to what kind of Greg was saying is, yes, when you're early in your career, maybe it's quote unquote harder to be an essentialist, but there is a way, like there is a path. I thought that was pretty powerful. All right, now let's play. We're going to play the last clip, Greg, kind of talking about really life's essential mission and detecting our mission in life.
To me, the most important conviction is that there is an essential and unique mission in life that needs to be detected, not just designed, not just selected. And that the great work of life is to figure that out and then to do it, to explore what's essential and then to go after it and make trade-offs necessary. And I think that somebody starting off in their career should certainly have that idea in mind. I don't think they even have to wait till the beginning of their career. I think it's an idea that can be taught effectively to children. And if you don't, what's going to happen is you're going to wake up at 30, 35, 40, or sometimes even later than that and just go, what am I doing? I have no idea. Why have I done this? And those are probably the saddest. I mean, they're meant as compliments, but I once had somebody write about essentialism. Oh, I feel quite emotional even saying this. And he said, I really loved essentialism. I just wish I'd read it 50 years ago. And I just think that's an unbelievable statement. I mean, to say you read it a year ago, okay, well, right, you took on too many projects over the last year, fine. But 50 years ago that's like your life. And so I just think this is the idea to begin with. Start off this way and keep coming back to it so that you don't get to the end of your career and then the end of your life and find, my goodness, I wasn't even pointed in the right direction.
I love that. And I find it fascinating, this idea of almost detecting and revealing your purpose rather than just selecting it, right? And I think that it speaks volumes to what is inside of us and that we know what our purpose is and we kind of got to reveal that to us. And whether or not you believe that, I do think that you feel called and you feel it when you're missing out, I guess, when someone else is controlling your life and you feel that you're missing out on the things that are very important. So I think for those that want to read this book, you'll find some valuable tips on how to lead your life and lead the essential parts. For me, I personally remember just realizing that I do find fulfillment in my job, as a football player and purpose in my job, but it doesn't define me. It doesn't define my purpose in life. And I really found that when I started not playing as well at one point. and I still find fulfillment and passion and try and, excel in it. But there were times when I did feel like it was controlling my life in a way that I realized, oh, this isn't me as a person. This isn't my purpose. I find fulfillment in it, but I want to control the parts of my life that give me that purpose. And that's where, hopefully you can do it young, but it's never too late to start of controlling your life, the parts that give you purpose and not letting anyone step on your toes in that area.
I think the principle that Greg talked about, that each individual has a unique essential mission in life that must be detected. And for me, one of the things that has helped me, because again, I'm coming up on 40 soon, just so everyone knows. I'm in the midlife crisis stage, right? Age group. And I think this whole concept of detecting your mission in life is really fascinating, that it does take work to detect it. You do need to try different things, but then also you need to do a lot of self-evaluation. I've found journaling to be really beneficial for me to kind of evaluate events, past jobs, future. What do I like? What do I don't like? So I just think that concept, I don't know if people think about that too often, about detecting their mission in life, and that it requires a combination of reflection, of going out and experience and trying new things, and then also kind of being in tune, with your conscience, and whether you want to direct that to a higher power, to God, to the universe, the energy in the universe. Like, I think there's different ways people look at it, but I just don't think that's common to have that concept of detecting it. So really powerful stuff from Greg. So let's kind of wrap this up, Brett. So as you re-listen to the recording I did with Greg a few years back, and again, we'll also link to that in the show notes if you do want to go back and listen to the original interview with Greg. And as you've recently reread Essentialism, what is kind of the one paradigm that stood out to you the most?
Yeah, I think it's what you mentioned earlier in the show, which is you say these things about being an essentialist, and it almost sounds like, oh, well, duh, of course, But I think it is one of those principles that you don't actually. For me, I think it's what you mentioned earlier in the show, which is, a lot of the principles that we talk about, but especially essentialism, that some things are more important than others, and that we need to focus on those key performance indicators, if you call them. I think it sounds pretty obvious in a way. And when you kind of skim the surface, it's like, well, duh, of course. But at the same time, I don't think we always evaluate this in our own lives and apply it to our own lives. We know that, but we don't sit back for a second and say, okay, where in my life, I look at my daily routine, my weekly routine, where am I missing this? What am I doing that is not essential, that I am spending a lot of time doing? And where are my toes being stepped on, to quote it, by other people that I can take more control over? So to me, it's just applying it to your own life is the big paradigm shift, because I think we all know that certain things are more important than others.
I agree. For me, my kind of key paradigm or key takeaway from the book is the first clip we played. If you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. So it's the foundational paradigm shift for me for this book, is recognizing that saying yes by default hands over control of your life to other people. So that's the power behind it. So we hope you enjoyed this episode, where again, we try to bring you the best of the best from these books. And we look forward to being with you next week.